My name is Ed Ferry, and I'm the owner and founder of Quality Vacuum Products. We started in 1991 and have over 9,000 customers worldwide. One of our strong features is our customer service and a very broad product line. What I want to talk to today is about glues and how they're affected in a vacuum press. Many glues can be used, however, they don't always react the same. So I'm not going to talk so much about the chemistry of the glues, but what's happening with the vacuum press. So let's take a minute now and go through the different glues that are available. Let's look at what's typically used in a vacuum press in the way of glues. Now, normally the bag doesn't care what kind of glue you use. It's just going to press with about a ton of pressure every square foot. The glues are affected differently, so let's talk about each one first. We have a contact cement, which is normally not recommended, but there are exceptions for it. We have your regular yellow glue and white glue. These are both PVAs, and we also have the new what is called a FAF set. This is a PVA with some other type of chemical in it to give it more grab. Then you have your polyurethane glues, and you have your epoxies, which are in the same category. And then you have the Urea glue. This is the glue that's recommended in the industry to do vacuum pressing and clamping. And we're going to talk about that and the different characteristics of it and why it makes it the glue of choice. So let's talk about each one individually now. Talk about contact cements. Contact cements aren't normally recommended for veneering. When you use contact cement doesn't ever get hard. There are two types. There's a water-based and there's a solvent-based. And one of the problems that can occur if you use it with veneer is that if you have a water-based contact cement and then you apply a water-based finish over your veneer, you can get bubbling because the moisture goes in, it'll penetrate, and you'll get bubbling and it'll ruin your job. You'll have to redo it. It never hardens fully. It can soften with heat. So if you put it in an area where there's going to be heat, you can get bubbling when it's out on the job site. Where it has been used successfully, to my knowledge, is with the plastic laminates. Normally, you get a job and you're doing cabinets, so they're small pieces, you can roll it with a J-roller and so on. However, when you have to do 4x8 sheets, 5x10 sheets, it's very difficult, especially if you don't have a pinch roller to press everything. And here the bag or the frame press is ideal for this sort of application. Talk about the PVA, polyvinyl acetate glues. You have your yellow glue, which is the most commonly used in the woodworking industry. You have your white glue, which is similar to it, only it just gives you more open time. And you have a relatively new one in the last couple of years. It's called a FAF set. And the advantage of it is that normally on normal conditions you can take it out of a vacuum press within a half hour or less. Now the yellow glues have the advantage that they're lower cost, they're easy to use, you don't have to mix them. But they do have a disadvantage in that they are water soluble, so that you apply a finish, if it penetrates the veneer or a seam, you can get bubbling, it'll loosen up. They're also sensitive to heat. You don't want to use it in around a fireplace or in a kitchen cabinet that's going to have an oven in it unless it's well insulated, because the heat can soften it. Also, if you're going to ship anything, you want to consider using another type of glue. I have a customer who did a curved staircase job. He shipped it. It went through the Arizona desert where the truck got up to 200 degrees on the inside, and when they took it out of the truck it was all peeling apart. The reason is the heat sensitivity and the fact that they were under stress trying to straighten out. Another thing about PVAs is they can take longer, the bigger pieces can take longer to cure. I've had customers call, they've been doing cabinet doors, they take them out of the vacuum press in an hour, hour and a half, and everything is fine. And then they do a 4x8 sheet and they take it out in an hour and a half and it starts bubbling in the center. The reason is it hasn't been in long enough for the moisture to migrate from the center of the sheet to the edges where it vaporizes immediately. Another issue with the PVAs is if you use it with a hard wood. If you're doing curved jambs, for example, or in my staircase example, it can take a long time to cure in a bag because the water has to migrate away from the joint. In a hardwood like your maples or oak or poplar or whatever, it can take a long time. It's not a matter of hours, it can be days for it to migrate away and you have a good bond. So typically on something like that, you don't want to use a PVA. You want to use something like an epoxy or the urea glue, which will use the water in a chemical reaction and be done in 4 to 6 hours. All right, let's talk about the polyurethane and epoxies. They have several advantages. It's a very rigid glue. It's a waterproof glue. And both of them will stick to other substrate materials like metal or glass and so on. With the epoxies, you have to get the right kind. I believe the polyurethane will stick to almost anything. The disadvantage when you use it in a bag is that you must keep it from getting on the bag. Now the polyurethane glue, the manufacturer will tell you if you use it in a vacuum press that what you want to do is wet one of the surfaces. It needs moisture in order for it to kick over and catalyze. And without the moisture, nothing is going to happen. So what you want to do is wet one surface, then apply a glue to the other, and then press it together. So they do have advantages, they do have disadvantages also. Let's talk about the urea glue. The urea glue is the preferred glue in the industry for all your MDF, chipboard, and plywood and so on. The reason is that it has many good features. One, it's a type waterproof glue. Therefore, it stands up to moisture much better than your PVA. So when you're applying a finish, a water-based finish, if it penetrates the veneer, the urea glue stands up to it. It's a heat-resistant glue. Once it's cured, it's rock hard. It doesn't soften with heat. And this is very important if you're ever shipping anything or if your work is going to see heat of any sort. The other thing about it is that you don't want to use it if your shop is going to go below 65 degrees or 60 degrees. The reason is that the chemical reaction slows down. It cures by a chemical reaction and the water gets wicked away into your substrate like MDF and it's not there for the chemical reaction. And so in a case like that, and I know many of you have cool shops, what you want to do is get an electric blanket to put on top of your VAK press. That way you get the temperature up, you can get it up to 100 degrees, you'll get a good cure, and also it'll shorten the cure time. Another feature of urea glues is that because they cure rock hard, when you sand through, like if you have a burl where the glue pushes through the openings, when you sand with it, it doesn't soften with the heat and gum up your sandpaper. So you can get a nice smooth finish without any problems. Now the urea glues come in two forms. There's a liquid form and there's the powder form. We have opted for the powder form just because it has a much longer shelf life. If you keep the lid on, this should last you a year or so. Both of them require mixing. With the liquid, you add a powder to it and you mix it. With the powder form, you add it to water. Another feature of the urea glues is that you get more open time than with a PVA. It's almost twice as long. You give up a longer cure time for it, but when you have many laminates to put together or pieces to assemble, you need that open time, especially if it's warm in your shop. If your shop is 80 degrees, for example, if you're using a yellow glue, you might have 4 or 5 minutes to get everything assembled and into the bag and under pressure, where you'll have about twice that with a urea glue. The urea glue also can be tinted. The normal color when it cures is a dark brown, and you can add a powder, a white powder, and it'll end up almost being white. So you can almost match any color of wood just by adding a tint to it. And one other feature that's characteristic of the urea glues is that it's an extremely rigid glue once it cures. Because it's so hard, you get very little spring back. So when you're making curved jambs or a curved staircase or any curved door or anything like that, you will get almost no spring back. So let's summarize now. We have different types of glues. We have your PVA, your yellow white glue that cures by moisture migrating away from the joint. We have your glues that cure by a chemical reaction, like your urea glues, your polyurethane, your epoxies. They all have their place depending on your needs in the shop. Also, you need to remember that when you get glue squeeze out on the bag, you should clean it immediately after you take your piece out of the bag. Because with time, that can adhere and it can be very difficult to get off. Typically, your yellow and white glue won't stick to the bag and you can just crinkle it and it'll come off. Also, that's true of the urea glue when you're finished with your job because it's still rubbery and it won't come off. However, if you let the urea glue stay there for weeks and months and you try and get it out later, you'll find that it gets pressed into the bag and it'll be very difficult to get it off. Glue cure time is affected by several factors. One is obviously the type of glue that you're using. Another factor, a key factor, is the temperature in the shop. Another factor is the size of your substrate. Small pieces on your PVA type glue will cure faster than a large 4x8 sheet. And also the type of substrate you're using. Again, with the PVA, if you're doing with MDF, it gets wicked away fast and it dries faster. That is not an effect when you use the other type of glues because they're curing by a chemical reaction. Typical dry times in a vacuum press, your yellow glue is anywhere from an hour to 4 hours. The white glue anywhere from an hour and a half to 5 hours. The urea glue is going to cure in 4 to 6 hours. These are all at 70 degrees. Your polyurethane glue can come out fairly quickly, maybe 15 minutes, depending what it is. It may have to leave it a lot longer depending on your substrate and so on. Your epoxies, again, they depend upon how much catalyst you add. You can do it anywhere from 5 minutes to 24 hours. So those are just rough numbers, but it puts things in perspective for you. A lot of this information presented here is based on our experience, not only with working with the glues, but also working with our thousands of customers. They call with questions, they experiment, and they give us feedback. If you have any information you'd like to share with us for the future, we'd love to hear from you. Don't ever hesitate to call us or to send us an email.